Now we want to get to another guest.
Yes, as the world has paused and is watching the funeral and procession of Queen Elizabeth's coffin, the United Kingdom's economy has also been put on somewhat of a halt. The 10-day mourning period did put many British institutions on hold. The British Parliament put budget talks on hold as well, and today is a bank holiday for the United Kingdom. Joining me right now, John Quelch, an economist, business professor, and former commander of the Order of the British Empire, appointed by Queen Elizabeth II. Good morning to you, John. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
What is the mood for you there? I mean, clearly we're reporting on this and watching as spectators, or as again, the collective world is seeing this historic day. But what does it feel like for someone who's there in person in London, do you think?
I think as a British citizen, one would feel an enormous sense of pride at not just the celebration that we saw in Westminster Abbey of the life of this extraordinary woman, but the majesty and the pageantry, the logistical precision, if I can put it that way, the choreography, all of that is just a testimony to everything that is good and great about the United Kingdom.
And for the British Parliament, the House of Commons, they were supposed to talk about Prime Minister Liz Truss's aid plan today. But of course, that is going to be put on hold for today's holiday. How could that affect the United Kingdom?
I think one of the major challenges for King Charles and the monarchy at this point is going to be to maintain the cohesion of the Commonwealth. And it was very interesting to note during the service in Westminster Abbey that the first lesson was read by the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Baroness Scotland. And there were other references to the Commonwealth of 54 nations during the course of the ceremony. There are a number of Commonwealth nations, maybe 14 plus the United Kingdom, where King Charles is the official head of state. But there are some of those nations which are questioning whether or not that should be the case. So that, in a sense, is a big picture issue for the monarchy that also bears upon the issue of foreign aid as well. But I think you will find that there is a sense of responsibility and an appetite in Britain at large to be over and above helpful, to the extent economic circumstances permit, to be over and above helpful to poorer nations around the world, and not just those in the Commonwealth, but beyond.
We think about every time there are big events. I was there for the wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and they talked about how much it would cost for security and to close down streets and to host quite an event, but then also the tourism dollars that would come in. There are reports that the Queen's death could cost the UK economy $2.6 billion. Clearly, it doesn't matter what the expense is. This day would happen. This day, no matter what the price tag, would be well worth it to honor such a beloved queen. But could there be also some financial bolstering because of this, with so many people coming from all around the world to pay their respects?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the right moment to do a return on investment analysis for, this ceremony. But just to underscore what I said already, this is an extraordinary if you like, advertisement for the United Kingdom. And whatever the cost is, it's irrelevant. But I'm sure that there are millions and millions of people watching this ceremony worldwide who will be potentially motivated to want to visit the United Kingdom and perhaps visit Westminster Abbey, which it's important to remember was inaugurated in the year 960. In other words, over 1,000 years ago. And the importance of history in our lives is something that in the age of social media we simply underestimate. But here on display, you can see centuries of tradition and history that do provide continuity, but don't necessarily get in the way of change and modernization either. I believe that you can have both and be benefited by having the weight of history and the responsibility that that gives you motivate your current decisions and your wisdom in everyday judgment. I think perhaps one of the most important points in the ceremony in Westminster Abbey was the expression that the Archbishop of Canterbury used, which was loving service. Not just service, but loving service, emphasizing the importance of compassion. Obviously, the Queen, as head of the Church of England, was, as was said earlier on your show, a stalwart Christian and defender of the faith. Now, what the Archbishop of Canterbury said to all of those prime ministers and presidents gathered in that wonderful abbey was just talking about what a great service you are doing to your countries is not sufficient. You have to be a loving servant, someone who is showing compassion in your day-to-day judgments, not just with respect to your family, but also with respect to the people who you are serving. And there are many people in that room, in that abbey, I should say, who probably if they gave it a moment's thought, would question just how good they are at providing loving service every day.
You know what? You said so much in that answer, and so much of what you said needed to be said, so I want to thank you for that. You struck exactly the tone that anyone who has a heart would. Certainly, I think a lot of people are watching all of this and they're thinking, wow, again, the pomp and circumstance of it all is just remarkable and is fitting with any funeral, especially for someone with such a reputation as Queen Elizabeth. It seems as though everything is calculated with compassion. Everything is done with explicit attention to detail in true British fashion. And just the regalia of it all is quite beautiful. Mitch, I know you wanted to jump in here and ask a question.
Yeah, John, I did have a question about the future of the British Empire, such as it is right now. When she came to power, there were 70 different countries, I believe, that were underneath the British umbrella, and now it is down to about 14. I was interested to learn when she passed that Canada and Australia, among other nations, still consider themselves to be part of the British Empire. They still have, Union Jacks on some of their regalia and some of the things that they have there. So, were you saying earlier that now that Queen Elizabeth has passed, after 70 years of reigning, there may be countries, even within that 14, who decide that they are not going to be part of the British Empire anymore, and that might break away now that King Charles has taken over?
I think there are some where you could see a questioning of whether or not the King Charles, should continue to be the head of state of the country. As you said, out of the 54 Commonwealth nations, there are 14 plus the UK where that is the case. And there could be, it's a moment of change, it's an inflection point. There's inevitably going to be an opportunity for those who wish to depart from the monarch as head of state to make their case. And it's important, I think, that King Charles and Prince William get on the move internationally and set forth in Ottawa and in Canberra and in other Commonwealth countries, what the role is of the Commonwealth and of each of those countries in it. They have to go out and make the case for continuity at this point. So I expect to see a significant number of overseas royal visits in the next year or so, next year or two. And I believe also that it's going to be essential for Prince William, the Prince of Wales, to be a close partner with his father, King Charles, in this endeavor, because they span two generations. Obviously, King Charles is not a young man. Prince William and Kate are young people. And the monarchy, if it's to have a future, has to continue to appeal across generations. And not just to people of my vintage, but to people in their 20s. And so I think that these overseas trips to shore up the power and importance of the Commonwealth are going to be extremely important and visible in the next 2 years.
John, I'm glad you touched on that, because I think that maybe one of King Charles's saving graces is that Prince William is so beloved and reminds so many across the world of his mother, Diana, and that perhaps with the two of them, they will be an undefeatable partnership, or at least a partnership that presents a picture to the world of more hope than King Charles could do on his own.
Yes, I think Prince William is going to be a close partner with King Charles in a way that Prince Charles was not able to be a close partner with Queen Elizabeth.
And it's interesting to note that Queen Elizabeth's reign began with a world tour of the empire. In fact, she became queen when she was in Africa in 1952 when her father, King George VI, died. And John Quelch, that is much the same behavior that you were asking for out of King Charles and Prince William, that they go on a tour and shore up all of the Commonwealths that might be wondering where they fit into this new British order. Thank you very much for coming on Morning in America.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.